Let's go.
What was your first name?
Okay, yesterday we've been asking the question, and the question is, how can we, since we know that the whole Nes of Hanukkah was a function of a level beyond the natural order and ultimately a level of revelation of Havaya de La'ela, which we know what that means. So how can it be that we've said that there are three different levels, Chav Dalet, Chav Chei, Chav Vav, which is Yichud Tatah, Yichud Law, and ultimately Havaya de La'ela. How can we say that? We started answering that question by virtue of understanding that the source of the miracle was ultimately completely beyond nature, but it was clothed in natural reality, such that the level of godly reality that was revealed in the world was shaykh to, first, relative to the Milchama, Yichud Tatah, a level of godliness that is expressed in nature, then finding the Pach Shem and Yehudi law, and then ultimately the miracle of miracles of Hanukkah, the oil lasting for 8 days. Okay, so we started Vav, I think.
Yeah.
We started Vav. Okay, and what the Rebbe said in Hay, the Rebbe said in Hay that the word that has a slightly different font. So the Rebbe says that the Mesiras Nefesh of Matisyahu Banav was obviously from the highest level, right? And that means also the source of the Nitzachon of the Milchama, the source of the victory in the war was from the highest level. But since in Gashmias, if you were to, how did that all play it out? It played itself out in Gashmias that there were few and weak that beat many and strong. Right, which albeit Gashmias looks like a supernatural victory clothed in physical terms. Well, that's exactly what it was. Right? It wasn't that some miracle happened that all of a sudden the Greeks disappeared. Greeks didn't disappear. They fought back. And as a matter of fact, they had to. The Matisyahu Banav obviously had to have certain strategies in how to do what it is that they. Well, actually, no, we didn't get into Vav. We got into Hay. Right? The last thing we saw was why we light on the left, right? That the Ner Hanukkah has the koyach to overcome the klip of Vura, small. So let's just start Hay again, because we just started it quickly last time. Valpi, Namavur ba Maimer. Because that's what I was just going over now, and I realized that I don't think we had gone very far in there.
Yeah.
Valpi Mavur, in Oisei on page Kuf base. Based on the Mesiras Nefesh, or as a result of the Mesiras Nefesh, the self-sacrifice of Matisyahu Banav, they ultimately drew down a level of light beyond the natural order. Meaning, what does that mean in terms of Mesiras Nefesh? We've talked about this. Mesiras Nefesh can come from different places. Mesiras Nefesh can come from intellect. A person comes to the intellectual conclusion that they think it's reasonable to give up their life for their country. Non-Jews do that. It's Mesiras Nefesh. It's not Mesiras Nefesh from Etzem and Nefesh, from the essence of their soul. Why? Because that level of soul they don't have. But can a non-Jew be Mesiras Nefesh? Absolutely, 100%. Amazing. I mean, aren't there armies all over the world full of people who are willing to die for their country? Okay, so where's that coming from? That can come from intellect, or it can come from a slightly higher place, ratzon, will. I have a will to defend my country, and that will overcomes even my will to live. I'm willing to sacrifice my will to live for my another level of will, which is the goodness of my country. Amazing. People do that. Right? And we talked about that yesterday in terms of Avram Avinu, that there were people who could have understood Avram Avinu's actions and his passing of all the tests before the Akedah as simply being a function of those different levels of reality, which means Avram Avinu is not necessarily so unique. Yeah, he's a special guy, but anybody else around could theoretically have reached that level. When do we see Avram Avinu reaching a level that's beyond anything that anybody else had ever experienced? That was the educator. And that's why the educator, it says in Chassidus and all over, that the educator opened the pipeline of Mesiras Nefesh of self-sacrifice for the Jewish people. Specifically that, because that came from Etzem and Neshama, the essence of Avram Avinu's soul. It was a place where Avram Avinu realized that even though this is completely counterintuitive, it doesn't make any sense, it's certainly not in line with my Ratzon, because my Ratzon is that this particular ideal that my life is about should be spread throughout the world, and that's not going to happen if I kill my son, but if this is what God wants, that's what I'll do. This is the way it is. There's no other way. I'm not going to disconnect from the Eibishter, even though this is completely, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever, on any level. Okay, but he did it anyway. B'simcha, which is the real chiddush of it all, right? Because after all, if God tells you to do something, so then I guess you're going to do it. But he did it after b'simcha. So Yitzchak, the Yelchu Shnehem Yaktav, says it twice in the story that we read every day. Right? So the true source of the victory in the Milchama was coming from that place. Meaning, what did the Chashmonaim say? Azoiv v'nitanish. We can't put up with this. We are not allowing ourselves to be separate from Kadosh Baruch Hu in any way, shape, or form, and we're going to go fight. Is that a reasonable thing to do? It's an unreasonable thing to do. Is that what they would want to do? Well, why wouldn't anybody want to go die? Right? Okay, but they realize that they can't allow this connection, this disconnect to happen. So the Rebbe says in the second line, we saw this yesterday very, very quickly at the end. Yesh Leimer, Ois Hey, Shagam Shoresh HaNes, the Nitzachon HaMilchama, also the source of the miracle of the victory in the war, Hu Bavai de Leila, Shalamayim Mishtashlos, is coming from the highest place. Ki Mesiras Nefesh, the Mesiras Nefesh of Matasyahu Banav Haiso was Shagam Shayu Chaloshim Hagam, Shayu Chaloshim Umatim, that even though, Hagam means even though they were weak and few, therefore, there's a very slim chance that they're going to emerge from this victorious. He said we can't live this way, so we'll give up our lives for the Eibishter. That's what I assume they thought they were doing. And since, as a result of their Mesiras Nefesh, which again the Rebbe points out, beyond the natural order of a person. It wasn't a function of our ratzon, it wasn't a function of our seichel, it was a function of our immutable connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's where this was coming from. So what were they able to do? They drew down a level of light that was beyond the natural order. Hanukkah. Now the ultimate expression of that is with the second miracle in the oil. But even the first miracle of the Milchama is connected to that, and that's what the Rebbe is saying here. We're going to have to understand, so if that's the case, so even more so you'd think we should celebrate Chaf Dalet. We've got to explain why not. That's our ultimate question. We're trying to figure out why we don't celebrate Chaf Dalet. So now we've come to a point where it might be we're wondering, no reason to wonder for very long, right? I'm not going to distract myself from what I'm doing. I'm learning a mimer. And that mimer is explaining things to me, so I'm going to keep learning the mimer. But certainly in the back of my head, I realize, wait a minute, this is very interesting. We're being taken to a place where there might be even a greater reason to celebrate on Chaf Dalet, because Chaf Dalet is connected to the highest level of miracle. But how? How? And that's where we talked about yesterday, through the levush, and that word is coming up, as you see, in a different font in a few lines. So they drew down the highest level of light. And that which is explained in the Maimer. Did I skip a line? Move on. Yes, I'm saying. It was move on, therefore it's understood. Fifth line. Shahanes, the miracle of, quote, from Alanisim, which you should say in Shachris today, in Moedim. The Masarta Gibarim Biyad Chaloshim V'Rabim Biyad Ma'atim, that you gave the strong ones in the hands of the weak and the many in the hands of the few. Shanim Shachal Yedei Mesiras Nefesh, and this miracle happened through their Mesiras Nefesh. Who the source of the miracle is clearly Mi'avai Deleilu, from the highest place. Okay, but then we have to understand. But we said, we talked about Yichud Tatah, Yichud Ilah, and then ultimately the third miracle being from the highest place. Okay, so first steps first. The ultimately also the miracle of the war comes from the highest place of godly reality and the highest place in our soul. Okay, so then where does Yichud Tatah come in? And here the Rebbe will explain. And that which is explained in the Maimer, Huva, that's brought, Le'il, earlier, Sif Gimel, in the third chapter. Those 6 different things which correspond to those 3 different levels of reality. Shirak, only, Hanes Daspakas Hashem, and only the nace of the oil lasting 8 days. Only that was drawn down mi'avayla delayla. Mashain that was not the case of a nace the nitzach and the nace of the victory of the war, but a nace the yitzias pach shemen, and also the nace of finding the pach shemen. That's all happening in the natural order. Right now, the finding the oil is miraculous, but it's miraculous in the context of findings, of the natural order. You can find things. It's possible to find things. We'll see what it ultimately represents. Okay, we said it, but finding things, that can happen. Every now and then we find things. I don't know whether we have to see that as a major miracle every time. Obviously, this was. So Yesh Leimer, the Rebbe says, so how do we understand that there seem to be 2 things going on simultaneously? The revelation of Etzem, and yet still that's being somehow clothed in natural reality within the context of the first 2 miracles. Yesh Leimer, Shebenisim Elu, in these 2 miracles, the first 2, Hamshocha Haisa, the drawing down of this level of completely transcendent godly light, Havaya de La'ela, that's how we're describing that level, which we said was only relevant to the 3rd miracle. No, it's relevant to the first 2 also. But the drawing down of that level was Belevushim the Ishtalshlus. It was in the garments of Ishtalshlus. What's a garment? A garment is a means of expression. How is that miracle expressed within the context of the natural order? Certainly the first one. And the second one to a certain degree. The third one is a complete obliteration of the natural order. These first 2 are miracles that are clothed in the natural order, one more than the other. That's why it's a step up. Meaning it's a step up from the milchama to the second miracle of finding the shemen. So let's see what the Rebbe says. It's going to explain it. About Sharsham, the source of all 3 miracles in Hanukkah, Humiyavai Delayla, is a level completely beyond the natural order. And for that reason, we celebrate all of them. Now, why don't we start on Chav Dalet? We'll see. The Yesh Leimer, the Rebbe says, can explain as follows. So I'm just looking for footnote 31 in the text because I wanted to learn that with you, but I haven't seen it. Where'd it go?
It's the very bottom page.
All the way down there, okay. So, the Yesh Leimer. Shezeu gam mi'ataimim al zeh. This is also one of the reasons, now the Rebbe is talking about the nigla of it, right? Because we've had this underlying question throughout, right, as to whether or not the Iker miracle is the war, the Iker miracle is the Pach Shemen, and our mimer is based on the fact that the Iker miracle is the war, so this obviously makes perfect sense. Now we're saying that the highest level of godly reality is also responsible for that miracle. Okay. So the Rebbe says, this is amongst the reasons for that reality. That in this mimer, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Kai Loshita Yom Tov to Hanukkah is relevant to the position that the Yom Tov of Hanukkah nikva gam ala neis to nitzachon v'chama. That it's also connected to the to the miracle of the war, right? Which, if you read the Gemara and Shabbos, right, so you would know that, right? If you read the Gemara and the Gemara asks, "My Hanukkah," just says we defeated the Greeks, and then it doesn't say how, and then it talks about the fact that we found oil and the oil burned for 8 days, and it was a great miracle, and so we celebrated for 8 days. It mentions the Greeks. But it mentions the Greeks within the context of what did they want to do. They were matamik ol shmanim shebahechel, and when we went in, after we defeated them, how did we defeat them? It doesn't say. After we defeated them, we found the Pach Shemen that lasted for 8 days, and it was a big miracle, etc. Okay. Talks about what they wanted to do, but it doesn't talk about the Melchama. And yet, our Maimer is going, and now all of it, obviously in Al Nisim we do. Al Nisim is basically only about the Melchama, and we've talked about this before. There's tension in Hanukkah. So our Maimer is based on the position that the Yontif of Hanukkah was established gam not only, but gam al neis the nitzachon Melchama. Obviously, if it was only the Melchama, then it would have been a one-day holiday like Purim. But it was obviously also on the miracle of the oil being found and lasting for 8 days. Even though some of the Shittas of matter of fact, most of the Shittas of the Rishonim ignore the war when they answer the question as to why Hanukkah is an 8-day holiday. Only the Rambam brings up the war. The Ritva says we lit the oil in an unusual way for 8 days. The Meiri says we found the Pach Shemen. Okay, it's all Shemen. Neither of those two Rishonim even mention the war. The Rambam is the one who mentions the war. So now our Maimer is based on the Shita that the Iker miracle is the war. Bichdei l'rames, and all of that is to hint. I mean, the Frierdiker Rebbe, by virtue of learning in accordance with that Shita, is hinting Shagama Neis the Nitzachon Melchama, that also the miracle of the victory of the war, Shayach, is relevant Levaya de Leila, to the same level of godliness that was responsible for the more impressive miracle of the oil lasting for 8 days. It's all the same. Kizeh Yomtiv de Chanukah, that which the Yomtiv of Chanukah Mispar Shmeina, it's 8 days, and the 8 days, of course, and we know this very well from Tana Rabbanan, Mitzvahs Ner Chanukah, the Bible we finished before we started this, that the whole Inyan of Chanukah is 8 days, and the whole Inyan of 8 days is L'mayla Mishtalshlus, is a level beyond the natural order, and that's the level that can illuminate the dark and transform the dark, etc. That's what Chanukah is all about. 8. And interesting enough, in the Gemara, my Chanukah, what is the first thing they say? 8 days. Right? First thing the Gemara talks about is it's an 8-day holiday. The Gemara, the Rebbe quotes that Gemara. The days of Hanukkah, 8 they are. First thing the Gemara says after it's asked, my Hanukkah, what's Hanukkah? Because this number, murder, and again, this is a review for us, murder teaches, as we said earlier in Sif Gimel, as we learned at great length in Tana Rabbanan, al or shalamayla mishdashlis, a level of light that's beyond the natural order. So the whole holiday is shaykh to that level of light, even the war. And that's why the Frierdiker Rebbe is explaining things in the context of the Iker miracle being the war. Even the war is shaykh to 8. Even the war is shaykh to 8. Bottom of is hay. Even the war is shaykh to the reality of 8. And that which the Yom Tov of Chanukah was established also regarding the miracle of the Nitzachon Melchama, the victory in the war, who is because Lefisha Gam Hasharish Danei also the source of this miracle, who ba'or shelamayla mishtashlis, from the light beyond hishtashlis. Okay, so we had a question. We said, wait a minute, I understand. Isn't Hanukkah all about the level of 8, and isn't Hanukkah all about this transcendent level? So how can you say that there's these 3 levels? So now the Rebbe answered that question, even though that question might strengthen another question. Right? Why don't we celebrate Chav Dalet? Okay, the Rebbe's going to answer that. But the basic answer the Rebbe gave to that is really all of Hanukkah Shar to the 3rd level of Hayat La'ela. But that 3rd level expresses itself in 3 different ways. It expresses itself very powerfully in nature through the victory of the war. It expresses itself in nature, but in a somewhat supernatural way. We found the Shemen, and we didn't do anything, right? It was not some unbelievable event. And it's an event that someone who doesn't understand things could certainly explain naturally, right? Even though it was a miraculous event, right? And then the event that can't be explained naturally. The pakshem. That's avai delayla, without any levushim, without any garments, without anything concealing the completely supernatural nature of it. Okay. So now that I was going to explain this. Okay? But we have the general idea. It's all the highest level of reality, but it's being expressed in different ways. In nature but above nature, and a complete obliteration of nature. And those are our three levels. Okay, so what's this all about? Let's see. The inyan hu. The matter is like this, meaning what's this all about, the Rebbe says. The Mesiris Nefesh Matiseo Banav. The Mesiris, we have to start with the war. That's where it all starts. The Mesiris Nefesh Matiseo Banav. Haisa Zeh Shalachim Uneged Yavanim. Obviously, their Iker Mesiris Nefesh was they fought the Yavanim. Now that is, and as we said before, that's a level of Mesiris Nefesh that's coming from the highest level of the Jew's connection to the Eibishter. Etzem and Neshama. Azoiv and Nidandrish. This is the way it is. There is no other way. They are completely and totally devoted to a Kadosh Baruch Hu and are willing to give up their lives in order to maintain a connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Because that's real life. Physical life is something of relative importance, but ultimately real life is our connection to the Eibishter. So if that connection can't happen while I'm in a body, so then it won't happen while I'm in a body. It'll happen on some other level. Obviously, it's supposed to. The Icarus is supposed to happen while I'm in a body. That's why we're down here. But if it can't happen there, so it won't happen there. If that's the Eibishter's choice that it won't happen there, then it won't happen there. But to distance oneself or to disconnect from a Kadosh Baruch Hu is impossible. V'yesh leimer. D'zeh shegam la'achrei mesiris nefesh. Rebbe says something really fascinating about the Chashmonaim. You have to understand their mesiris nefesh. Shegam la'achrei mesiris nefesh. After their act of mesiris nefesh, after they fought the Greeks, and they beat the Greeks, Habal Yedei Gilu Yechida, which came as a result of the revelation of this level in their soul where they can't disconnect from the Eibishter, the highest level imaginable. Nirgash Etzlam, still felt by them, Shi Yeshne Menagid, that there's an opponent, Shitzarech Lilchem Negde, that they have to fight against. Rabbi, so to speak, is getting into the mindset of the Chashmonaim as they're experiencing this incredible gilui of their essential connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. How is that being expressed? They're sitting quietly, making plans in how to attack the Greeks, and thinking that, well, that might not work, and they might get us over there, and they might kill us if we do it. And so we better do it this way, and we'll try it. They just like walked into the middle of the street, and all the Greeks fell down? No, that's not how it happened. There's a real enemy. The enemy is dangerous, and I have to use all of the keches that I have, all of my imagination and creativity, etc., to figure out how to beat them on the battlefield. Now, obviously, this is guerrilla warfare, because there's a lot of them and not so many of me. So I'm not going to meet them on some battlefield that's, just in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to be, I'll be the Viet Cong. Right? It's going to be guerrilla warfare. Okay. It's probably something that no one ever heard of, but that's okay. What am I going to do? Okay, fine. That means there's a menagid. That means there's opposition. Now that's very interesting. Why is that? Why is that an interesting idea if we're talking about a reality of Yechidush B'Nefesh? What's been our explanation of Yechidush B'Nefesh all along? What's unique about the Mesiris Nefesh that comes from Yechidush B'Nefesh?
Makes no sense.
Okay, but that's the same as Ratzon. It's Yechidush.
There's like no negative.
Oh, there's no negative. Right, that's the whole. Isn't that the whole vert in Yechidush B'Nefesh? All the other levels of soul have an opposition. All the other levels of soul. If my connection, just forget about Mesiris Nefesh for a second, right? In terms of understanding, if my My relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu is based on an intellectual understanding that it's reasonable to serve God, so then it's theoretically possible for someone to convince me intellectually otherwise. Right? Okay. There's certain things that I can't explain intellectually. Right? As a matter of fact, if you believe in God, there's something that by definition you can't explain intellectually, and that's why things happen to certain people that you wouldn't think should happen to them because they happen to be very righteous people, and yet things happen to them that just don't seem to be in line with that. We can't explain that rationally. A person who doesn't believe in God has no problem with that. It's all random, and so why not? I don't understand. Why should his life be any different than his life based on the way they lead it? Well, it's all random, and things happen. Just, bad luck. Okay, whereas we don't look at the world that way. So if it's all the Eibishter, so then I understand why the Eibishter did this to this person, or did this to these people, or did this to 6 million of these people. I don't get it, and I'll never get it. Okay. Someone else can get it, no problem. I mean, I said that doesn't mean they think it's a good thing to do, but I mean, why not? That's the way the world works. It's just what's out there. There's no rhyme or reason to anything. Okay, so we can explain almost anything. I shouldn't say we say almost everything. We can explain incredibly sophisticated ideas about what existence is and how it works and where it came from, etc., etc. There's one thing that we have absolutely no ability to explain whatsoever, and that's those issues. That main issue of, why do bad things happen to good people? Okay, we can't explain that. Okay. So if my relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu is based solely on intellect, that will bother me. If it's not, I can transcend that. It doesn't mean it doesn't bother me. It's not going to bother me in terms of my relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's going to bother me because it still hurts to see people experience pain. But it's not going to bother me in terms of my relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Why? Because that can come from a higher place. Okay, it can come from a place beyond intellect. So it could come from a place called Ratzon, a very powerful experience of the desire of my godly soul to connect to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that's true, there's such a place. It's super conscious, but what if I somehow tap into that super conscious place in me, where I have a very powerful desire to connect to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? And so then I will probably be connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Could there be another desire that contradicts that? Yeah, that's what Misha said. Every level has a contrary force of the Nefesh Abamis, of the animal soul. The animal soul also has desires. And the most basic desire of the animal soul, self-preservation. Okay, so what if the desire for self-preservation comes in the way of my relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu? It might be I'll choose self-preservation over the relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Temporarily. That happens. Is that a terrible, horrible person? Well, they made a mistake, but I don't know whether they're a terrible, horrible person. Right? Okay. And there are situations where we're actually told to do that, Al Pi Torah. Right? Sometimes, I mean, one of the strange things you experience as a once you get married and have children, or serve in an army, but for most people it's getting married and having children, is you find yourself in a car on Shabbos every now and then. So your wife happens to be in labor. So you're just going to get in the car or the ambulance or whatever, and you're going to do something that is like a very bizarre thing to do. You're just not used to doing this. Like, what am I doing in a car on Shabbos? Well, you're in a car on Shabbos, right? If you're in an army, so you're also going to get in the car on Shabbos, right? It's going to happen. Right, okay, fine. That's the way it goes. And that's very strange. Well, why do you do it? Well, because nefesh is derech Shabbos. I mean, if it's saving lives is derech Shabbos, so sometimes if I'm saying going to, having a baby, because that's a nice reason to go to a Beit Refuah, right? But there's other reasons also. It might be that chas v'sholom, a person has certain pains and they don't know what it is, and it's dangerous, and they went to their neighbor who's a doctor. You say, you better go to the hospital. When? Shabbos, go to the hospital. No games, right? Okay. So that happens, but there also might be times when the person, now that's a person keeping the Torah by virtue of going to the hospital. The Torah tells me he has to go to the hospital. And it's not Mesiras Nefesh not to go to the hospital, it's idiocy not to go to the hospital. That's not Mesiras Nefesh, that's stupid. Go to the hospital. Right? The Mesiris Nefesh is going to the hospital. God wants me in the hospital right now. I don't really want to go in a car. God wants me in a car, so get in the car. Okay. Why does he want me in a car? I don't know. Make your cheshbon nefesh after you get to the hospital. You'll have time. You'll be sitting there. You probably have to wait in the emergency room for a few hours. You can think about why God was putting you through this right now. But okay. But that's Ratzon. And Ratzon, there might be a level of Ratzon of the Nefesh of Bahamis that is contrary to your desire to serve God that comes from your Nefesh Elokis. As Moshe said, Etzem and Neshama, there's no opposition. This is the way it is, and there isn't anything else. That's why it's so powerful. That's why it overcomes everything. So now the Rebbe is saying something really fascinating about the Mesiris Nefesh that comes from Yechidas Shebenefesh of the Chashmonai. They're absolutely, completely, and totally aware of the Menagid. He's right there, and he's got a gun. Right? That's really interesting. It's not like he disappears as soon as, Meiser Nefesh, I'm connected to my Yechidas Shebenefesh, and I walk out, and the Greeks all melt. No, that's not what happened. They're sitting there in their little, wherever they sat, right? And they're plotting. Well, let's try this and let's try this, but wait. That's not gonna be so good for you if you're over there. Maybe you should be over there because they seem to hang out over here. So you go over there. Be very, very careful, right? Because chas v'shalom, it could be that this isn't gonna work. I really hope this works. I hope the Yeshiva helps us out with this. That's interesting. That's an interesting expression of Mesiris Nefesh from Yechidas Shebenefesh, right? That's very different than how we usually relate to it. Right? The Alter Rebbe, Mesiris Nefesh Yechidas Shebenefesh, sitting in jail. What did the Alter Rebbe say? Now, even though that, interestingly enough, was also Pada B'Shalom, and we learned about that, but we have to talk about that because it's so based on this. It's so interesting. It was interesting without this also, but it's even more interesting once you see this. That what? The Alter Rebbe said when he got out of jail. No, I remember that story, this famous story, everybody knows the story. Ayeka, where are you, right? Where the minister came in and asked the Alter Rebbe. The ministers figured out that the Alter Rebbe is this special person. They had this very, very special holy man in there. And most of these guys were religious on some level, right? I mean, these were Russians in the 1700s, right? So they believed in something, right? That, had icons all over the place. They heard that they had this very, very, very holy person there, and the different ministers were coming down to sort of sneak in. Some disguised and some not. The Tsar came disguised, and of course the famous story, the Alter Rebbe stood up. Your Majesty, how did you know? Someone who's sensitive to the kingship of heaven is sensitive to kingship on earth, etc. The Tsar himself came to see the Rebbe. He dressed up as a guard, and he came to see the Rebbe. But so this minister, the Minister of Education, I believe it was, who was clearly a very interesting person. So he came down and he asked the Rebbe a few questions, and one of the questions, of course, was the pasuk in Chumash, right at the beginning, where after Adam and Chava ate lunch and brought about the destruction of Gan Eden, so what does the Eibishter say? What's the first thing God says to Adam Rishon? Where are you? Ayeka. So that's an obvious problem, because God knows exactly where he is. He put him there. Right? And even if he didn't put him there, he still know where he is because he's God. So why in the world did the Kadosh Baruch Hu ask Ayeka? So what answer did the Alter Rebbe give first? Not the famous one. What did he say first? He said over Rashi on Chumash that God was, so to speak. Rashi says the Eibishter was, so to speak, entering into a conversation, not to what did you do? No, Adam, where are you? Which every parent has said to a child that they're about to rip to pieces because they're like, well, why is the window all over the floor? Shimmy, where are you? Okay. Where are you? Okay, that's what Rashi says. So what did this minister say? He said an amazing thing. This is my favorite part of the story, personally. He said, I know what Rashi says. I want to know what you say. An educated goy in the 18th century knew Rashi and Chumash. That's what it meant to be an educated person in Europe, Russia. Russia there's Asian Russia and there's European Russia. This was, there was Asian Soviet Union, but also Russia itself, so huge that there's that. But, Moscow, Petersburg, those areas were very, very, very European. I mean, what language did the intelligentsia speak to each other in Russia? French. They didn't speak Russian, they spoke French, right? Who's Tolstoy's favorite guy? Pierre. Okay, they spoke French to each other. So he asked a rather amazing question. He said, I know what Rashi says, but I'd like to know what you say. And the Alter Rebbe gave a very, very amazing answer. What did he say? He said, it's God's question to everybody. Where are you in life? What have you accomplished relative to what you were supposed to accomplish? What was the purpose you were sent here to do? And how much of that have you accomplished? Where are you in that scheme of things? And then the Rebbe said, for instance, you're 54 years old, and Okay. So the Alter Rebbe, that's an amazing story. Everybody tells a story. The Alter Rebbe told us about that story. When the Alter Rebbe got out, so he told the Chassidim a certain part of that story. What's that? That the Alter Rebbe said that story saved his life. That event saved his life. Because where was he holding? He was holding in a place where he was getting close to Kleis Nefesh. He was getting close to a place where his soul was going to leave his body because he was enjoying himself so much, having no responsibility other than the ability to sit and contemplate godliness all day in prison. He didn't have to do anything. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't take care of the Chassidim, couldn't take care of the world, couldn't do what tzaddikim generally do. So what was he doing all day? He's contemplating godliness all day. And he said, I was close to the point where my soul was going to leave my body. That story reminded me, no, I have what to do in Eilam Hazeh. So I stayed here. So that's why am I telling that story now? That's the expression of Yechidah B'Nefesh, where there's no menagid. There's no Russians. There's no jail. There's nothing. There's just the Eibishter. The Alter Rebbe is leaving. This is really his stat. He's in jail. The Russians put him in jail. They're probably going to kill him. That's what was supposed to happen. They were astounded. They themselves were astounded that didn't happen, right? Even though they're the ones who signed off on it. And then the Alter Rebbe wrote that in his letter to Rav Levi Yitzchak, that the greatness of the Kadosh Baruch Hu was revealed b'kerev haaretz, meaning even the ministers were awestruck by the miracle of him getting out of jail alive. But what was he doing in jail? Contemplating godliness. There's no Russians, there's no jail. All there is the Eibishter. He's living that. Right? So that's really interesting in the context, to go back to Pada B'Shalom, that we talked about the fact that it seems like it was a milchama, because after all, there was a milchama, but there wasn't, interesting enough, there was a point in the whole reality of the story that ended up becoming the holiday of Yud Kislev. There was a point where by the Alter Rebbe, there was taka no milchama. He then decided that it should be a milchama by virtue of saying, no, I have to stay in Eilam Hazeh. Meaning, I have to relate to the reality around me as existing. And now his Mesiras Nefesh is going to be a little different than what it was before. Before it was, there's nothing but the Eibishter. I'm going to sit there and this is the greatest. I'm going to sit and contemplate godliness all day. I have nothing else to do. It turned into something else based on that story. He made it Pada B'Shalom Mikravli, right? The Alter Rebbe turned it into that by virtue of making the decision that he made after that story, which is really so interesting. Right, so but the Matisyahu Banov, they're not, so relate that to the Alter Rebbe before that story. They're not just sitting there contemplating godliness and coming close to a state of Kleis Nefesh because all there is the Eibishter, and there's no Greeks. Not at all. They are encountering the reality of the Greeks head on and plotting how to deal with it. They're not making plans. Of course they're making plans. And yet it's all still coming from a place where there's no menagid. What do you mean there's no menagid? He's right there. How can you say there's no menagid? I just shot one. I just put an arrow through the chest of one of the menagdim. And there's another one behind him that I missed his arrow missed me by inches. It hit my ear. Okay. Wild. Okay, so then what's happening? There's a revelation of Etzem and Neshama. So that's the source of the Mesiras Nefesh of the Chashmonaim, but it's all being clothed within the context of the existence of a menagid, the existence of opposition. Even though the spiritual source of all this is a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu where that reality doesn't exist, but that's being expressed in a reality where it does exist. That's the first level. That's such a fascinating take on it. That's such an amazing take on it all. So what do they think? So keep reading. So what happened? Nirgash etzlam sheyeshnei menagid. They were now the Rebbe says gam achrei Mesiras, even after the Mesiras Nefesh, meaning once they came to the decision, we're going to war. Why? There's a revelation of Gilui. There's a Gilui of Etzem and Neshama, of the essence of their soul, Yechidah Nefesh. They're still aware of the fact that the Greeks are there. They didn't disappear. Nirgash etzlam sheyeshnei menagid. It's felt by them that there is opposition. Shetzarich lilchem negdar. You have to fight that opposition. How's that work? Ulafisha Gilui Yechidah. This revelation of Yechidah Haya Ba'ifin was in such a way sheshayich lekeches hagiluyim that it was relevant and ultimately shone and penetrated into the revealed powers, the neshama of their soul. Meaning their conscious reality and etzem and neshama and the essence of their soul were one. But not one to the extent that they completely transcended physical reality. They were in physical reality in the most obvious way. And yet they were still connected at that moment, Etzem and Neshama. So their actions within the context of their encounter with the opposition was guided by Etzem and Neshama. Did they think that they might lose? Well, putting the notion of bitachon to the side, I assume they had a lot of bitachon. Okay, say that. But simply, were they intellectually aware of the fact that this might not work? Well, of course they were. How could you possibly not be? Right? Yet they just went out there and did it. So it's etzem and neshama, but it's etzem and neshama as it's expressing itself within the context of the most basic reality in nature. It's not obliterating nature, it's just shining in nature, through nature. That's Yichud Tatah, in the realm of Yichud Tatah. So the revealed reality is Yichud Tatah. The levush is Yichud Tatah. What's really going on is Havai Dalet, the highest level. The Kasher Gilui Yechidah, that when Gilui Yechidah, who it is Kameshi Bim Kaima, as it is in its place, meaning the revelation is a revelation of my essential connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but of course that essential connection is transcendent of my life in this world on a certain level. That's the Alter Rebbe in jail before that conversation. Mikev and Shebechinas Yechido, and since the level of Yechida Ein Kenegda Lumezeh, which is what Moshe said to us, which is true, there is no opposition. That's the level of the soul where there is no opposing force in the nefesh habahamis, in the animal soul. So therefore, that's a complete victory. That's what we learned in Tana Rabbanan. Hamasiris nefesh hu. Therefore, the Masiris generally is he ba'ofen she'einu choshev klal oidis hamenagid, that he doesn't think in any way, shape, or form about the opposition. That's generally how it's expressed. There is no opposition. It's just the Eibishter. Oh, so that's the Alter Rebbe in jail before he has that conversation. There's no jail, there's no Russians, there's no black carriage, it's just the Eibishter, and he's sitting there calmly contemplating godliness because he has time. There's nothing else to do. Baruch Hashem. Reb Mendel said the happiest years of his life were the years he spent in Siberia. Because he knew he was there because of Mesiras Nefesh. What did he do all day to keep himself sane? I mean, obviously he worked a lot. But what kept him sane? He used to chazer in his mind for bringins by the Rebbe. He would just remember for bringins when he was by the Rebbe Shab as a younger man and the Frierdiker Rebbe when he was older. And he would remember Farbrengen, and he would just chaz with the Farbrengen. He'd see the Rebbe walk in, and he'd see the Rebbe say l'chaim, and he'd listen, he'd say over to himself the sikha that he heard, the maimer that he heard, and the gundim that they sang. That was his experience in Russia. Now, other things happened. Right? So the Rebbe says, "V'zeh shem Mesiras Nefesh d'mataseo bonav." It's a whole different Mesiras Nefesh. Haisa ba'ifin was in a way shalachamu neged menagdim. There's menagdim, and I'm fighting them. So simply, in terms of a Veita, where would you put that? Fighting the enemy in a Vedas Hashem. Where is that in the levels that we learned? We learned it. We know it. Where is that? There's an enemy and I'm fighting him. What level of Avedas Hashem is that? What level of Achdus Hashem is that? You shouldn't be hemming or hawing. You should know that so clearly. What? That wasn't one of our levels.
The Tata level, like the
Yehuda Tata, it's right there on the board. Yehuda Tata. That's the Milchama, right? There's a Yetzer Hara. I'm down here in Eilam Hazeh. Eilam Hazeh exists. Right? But the whole purpose of Eilam Hazeh is that I should serve God in Eilam Hazeh. I'm very aware of my own existence. I'm very aware of the existence of the world. I'm very aware of the taste of apple pie with ice cream on top. But I still understand that the purpose of my creation is to serve God. I am, but the I that is supposed to serve God. That's called Yehuda Tata. Well, that means I'm battling the Nefesh Bahamis, who is the source of that experience that I am. And I'm battling him all the time for control over my thought, speech, and action. What am I going to do? Because my Nefesh Bahamis would like to do all sorts of other things, like eat apple pie all day. The only difference would be what flavor would the ice cream be. Okay. So that's a milchama. That's Yehuda Tata. That's the lower level. So mitzad echad, there's a revelation of etzem and neshama, and that's why they went to war in the first place. Mitzad sheni, the expression of that in the world was Yehuda Tata. There's a battle, and they're trying to win the battle. Now they do win the battle. And that's what we'll see in footnote 31 in a second. V'zeh shemesiras nefesh d'mataseo bonav, such a chiddush. This is an incredible chiddush in the whole story of Hanukkah. That they fought the opposition, even though, there's a revelation of Yechidah Sheba Nefesh, there's still a menagid, there's still opposition. The revelation of the Yechidah was in such a way, in such a way, a fashion, such that it resonated in their conscious being, their revealed powers, meaning their conscious self. So on one hand, that's much higher. That's amazing. That's incredible. The obliteration of the opposition, that's one thing. Defeating the opposition where they are, that's another thing. It's an even greater defeat. Right? And that, to a certain degree, is how we see the difference between Yetzias Mitzrayim on one hand and Hanukkah and Purim on the other. Usually we talk about that relative to Purim. God's not even mentioned in the whole story, and we win. But let's see what the Rebbe says in footnote 31. It's really very interesting. Pesach, the Eibishter just wipes them out, right? He just is destroying them time after time after time. It's all coming from above. We're not even doing anything. We're just watching. So look at footnote 31. Elo. Now footnote 31 was after the words, but the Seo Bonav, Haisaboif, and their Mesiras Nefesh in such a way, Shalachamu Neged Menagdim. They fought the opposition. Elo. Shafal PK. Nevertheless. This battle against the opposition, he boyfriend the Mesiras Nefesh. He's Mesiras Nefesh. Sha'amiti se'inyan the Mesiras Nefesh. The true expression of the notion of Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, which is coming from Yechidah Sheba Nefesh, and we've said this over and over. Who she'i efshar liyos ba'efen acher, that it's impossible that it can be any other way. In other words, separating from the Kadosh Baruch Hu is impossible, because on that level it is impossible. That level of our connection to the Eibishter cannot be broken. Even if I want to break it, it's unbreakable. Right? The muscle we've used over and over and over again. You dye your hair blonde for 40 years, it does not affect your DNA. Your DNA is still whatever color hair you're supposed to have inside your genetic code. That's who you are. You want to do something contrary to that. That'll affect your revealed experience and your revealed reality. It won't affect your essential reality. It still is what it is. Okay. Because this comes from the revelation of Yechida Shebenefesh, that place where you and I are essentially connected to the Eibishter and can't be distanced or disconnected from him. It's impossible. So now the Rebbe explains this in a very fascinating way. And to explain this based on that which is explained by Dibur Maskell, another mimer, L'chamar Libi, my heart says to you, which is in Tafshin Chaf, 1960. The Rebbe says that's Nitfas. The Sefer Maimar Melukat Gimel. We're learning melukat dalet. That's melukat Gimel. The year before, that came out as an edited mimer, which we talked about when we started learning this. Chela Gimel, Amud, page Reish Pe'al, page 281, Ve'elach and further. That what? The Ha'aras Nekudas Halev, the illumination of the point in the heart, that point in the heart of a Yid that's completely connected to the Eibishter. He, Mashameir Mipanimius Alev, that which it shines from the inner recesses of who we are, meaning our essential state, but it shines out L'chitzonius Alev, to our external conscious state. So meaning, my emotional reality, which is me feeling me. Emotion is, obviously extremely powerful, subjective reality. Okay, but that feeling of me will be one with my complete connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So I'll be feeling my connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu in my conscious, emotional state. It's really quite a beautiful thing. Skip the brackets. Lochin, ksiv ba. Therefore, it says, ki seitze lemilchama. Parsha Seitze. Ki seitze lemilchama aloi vecha. When you go out to war on your enemies, it should say ki seitze lemilchama be'oi vecha. You go out to war with your enemies. No, why on your enemies? So what the Baal Shem Tov teaches us, and it's a basic tenet in not just Chassidus, the whole Jewish world. Baruch Hashem learns it through the Baal Shem Tov, that when you go out to war on your enemy, who's your enemy? The Yetzer Hara. You're aloi vecha. You're already on top of him. If you go out to war, you win. What's the problem? I might not fight. If I go to war, alavecha, you're already alavecha. You're already going to be on top of him. You're already going to be victorious. And keep the ikar is to go out to war. It's not just letting Bahamis have everything that he wants. No, to fight him. And if I fight him, I'll win. Why? Was Tanya tell us, based on the Maimer Chazal, Zeh v'zeh sheiftan, right? This one and this one judge him, not rule him, judge him. That what? There's two judges that are judging whether or not we should listen to one aspect of ourselves or another, which is really basically the Nefesh B'Hamis, Nefesh Elokis, fighting over control. So there's two judges. If there's two judges judging a case and they disagree on the verdict, so what happens? We listen to the opinion of the third judge. That's why there's always an odd number in every Jewish court. Okay, so we listen to the third judge. Who's the third judge? The Eibishter. Who's the Eibishter going to judge in accordance with? Nefesh B'Hamis, Nefesh Elokis. So if I go out to war, I'll win. Okay, so that's ki seitz l'machama aloi vecha. That's the Baal Shem Tov's pshat in that pasuk. Aloi vecha, l'maylo mi'avecha, beyond your enemy. The Rebbe here quotes Likutei Torah. The Alter Rebbe takes it. Parsha Seitze, right? Loshen zeh, this language murder teaches shnei inyanim, two things. Sheyesh legaba metzius ha'oived. I'm sorry. That there is an existence of the enemy, right? There's an enemy. says you'll be on top of your enemies. I guess there's an enemy I'm on top of. So there is a menaged, right? Even though we're talking about a revelation of Panemius Alev, the inner aspects of our heart, meaning that part of us that's completely connected to the Eibishter. But there might be even with the revelation of that, there might still be an enemy. Not an enemy to that, but an enemy in reality, so to speak, outside of that. Meaning what I'm facing, what I'm encountering, what I'm experiencing in Elam Hazeh. There's an enemy out there to deal with it. So there is an enemy. Why? Ki in Yanahu, the whole idea is Shemeir, that this inner connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shining and expressing itself l'chitzonius alev, to the external aspect of our heart, meaning to conscious me. Va'af al pi kain, even though there is an enemy, liyesa ha'adam mipnimius alev, since the true energy that's guiding this encounter is coming from the innermost part of you and I, which is the innermost part of our heart, which is the part of us that's completely connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and can't be disconnected. It's just expressing itself in conscious reality, but the true source of it is essential reality. It's beyond the enemy. There is an enemy, but I'm beyond the enemy. She'ein la'oyev shlita v'achizah. The enemy has no power. There's no control. There's an enemy. There's no control. So on one hand, Matasyahu Banav see the enemy, but they realize that they can defeat the enemy. So they go out to battle. Now, even if they didn't think they could beat, the existential reality is they think they can defeat the enemy because their koyach is coming from a place where, so to speak, there's no enemy. But it's expressing itself, the lavush, the garment of it, the expression of it is in a place where there is an enemy. Okay. So they have bitachon, they'll beat the enemy, but they realize there's an enemy and they're going to have to plot how to beat him. Okay. We all have a nefesh habahamis. Can we beat him? Absolutely, 100%. Okay, how? Well, you better have a plan. Just to wing it isn't going to work. All right? It's interesting how people, what it is that we're willing to do without a plan and what it is that we aren't willing to do without a plan. Right? I remember talking to a birthright group. I said, sign up, welcome birthright. Is there a birthright group coming through here at some point or something?
Yeah.
Yeah? When are they coming?
I think
Friday. Okay. We used to have them all the time. Used to come all the time. I was hoping when we built this building that we'd start bringing the birthright groups through for their days of learning. But a birthright group, but this was graduate students. And so Rabbi Silberg and I used to be the two people who used to teach the birthright groups. We'd alternate. And so I was teaching this group of graduate students. And we learned something. It doesn't matter, what we learned. What we learned had something to do with the whole notion of how relationships work. It was actually next week's parsha about the reuniting of Binyamin and Yosef and the reuniting of Yaakov and Yosef, and they cry on each other's shoulders, etc. The Rebbe explains that in an astounding way, what that means and what that's all about. So I took it into the place of relationships because that's something very important for people to hear and think about. So here are these graduate students who had been, okay, let's say you start serious education at 15. Until then, you're just, not necessarily thinking about too much. Okay, it's 50. This person actually might start thinking about things. So these guys were 23, 24. So for the last 8 or 9 years, they've been involved in education in a fairly serious way. They did 4 years of undergraduate. Now there's, first, second, third year of graduate work. Okay. So today, what does it mean to go to college? So college is a trade school. People go to college to learn how to make a living. That's why most people in college are not in college in order to learn about Western civilization. No one does that anymore. Right? Whether they should or shouldn't is a separate question, but they don't. Right? So college is a trade school. You go to get a job. So they've been working on getting a job for, 7, 8, 9 years, pretty seriously. So I said, how long have you guys been? Okay, good. Can I ask you a question? How many books on marriage have you read? not one guy in the room had ever read a book on marriage. He said, oh, so making a job, getting a job, making a living, that you're preparing for 8 years all day. Marriage, you're just going to wing it. You'll figure it out as you go along. Yeah, that's going to work. Maybe you should think about how it works and what to do and how to be a better husband. And maybe that's something you really prepare for that a little bit. Maybe think about it. They were flabbergasted. Anybody? I mean, obviously, when they heard that idea, that was a reasonable idea. That's not so hard to figure that out. But no one had ever mentioned that to them. They found quite interesting, and that they had never thought of that themselves. And okay, meaning we prepare for things, right? You figure out. So now that doesn't mean that I don't have bitachon, that I'm going to be successful at it. So the Chashmonim are preparing for this, but what do they know? They're alei vecho. They're going to win. Which is really interesting, right? They have the possibility of losing, again, how bitachon works. So based on the Rebbe's understanding of bitachon, so they wouldn't even have a harabim, they're going to lose. Okay, but simple shot in the story, I assume they at least at the beginning, appreciated the fact that it's possible to lose. Okay, but once there's a revelation of Yechidus B'Nefesh, and that revelation is expressing itself b'chitzonius alev, as the Rebbe just said, i.e., in my encounter with the outside world, so then what must I understand? I'm alei vecha, which really means I can't lose, because the pnimius alev is shining through chitzonius alev. Yeah.
Previously, we said that by the Hashmonim fighting, that's what brought the Giloi from above. Like that's what brought the divine revelation from above, and then that's how they were able to win.
Right.
And that's the miracle. But now we're kind of saying that no, they were already having a strong revelation on them, and they just went out, and then they just
Okay, but there's one word that I'll change from what you said, and I think it's the answer to your question. The first revelation, so to speak, was in them. That was their avodah from below of the gilui of Yechidus B'Nefesh. That's what they did mitzad their own avodah, connecting to that place where they are essentially connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That produced the revelation from above. Because the Rebbe said it came from Mata, right? It came from below. First, it started with their avodah from below. What was their avodah from below? The Mesiras Nefesh of Yechidus B'Nefesh. The Mesiras Nefesh from the highest place. Okay, that produced a revelation from above. But interesting enough, that's what's so interesting. That's what the Rebbe is explaining to us. The first revelation from above was completely clothed in nature. It was Yehuda Tato. They won a war. The next one, a slightly higher level of godliness. They found the Pach Shemen. The third, ultimately, where's it all coming from? Interestingly enough, they're Mesiras Nefesh. Okay, if there's no war, none of this happens, right? But there seems to be a process. We haven't seen that yet in the Mimer. I was going to explain. Well, that bit's obvious now, though. There's this process of what level of reality is being revealed. Well, there's this three-step process. The first, it's all coming from their Mesiras Nefesh. It's all Mesiras Nefesh. So it's all Havaya Delay. First, that's clothed in the victory in the war, Yehuda Tata. Then that's clothed in finding the Pach Shemen, Yehuda Tata, Yehuda Ilah. Then that's revealed in the ultimate miracle. And was the ultimate miracle revealed? That it was all that all the time. So now we're really confused. Once we're going to say that, so why aren't I celebrating Chav Vav? I don't get it. I should either celebrate Chav Dalet or Chav Vav. Chav Hey is just in the middle there. Why am I celebrating that? I don't know. The question's gotten stronger from explaining it all now. We're going to answer the question at the end. But, okay, let's stop there. Have an amazing Chanukah, an amazing Shabbos. Remember to say Al Nisim in Davening today, in Shachris. If you forgot, you don't have to go back and daven again. But you should say it. When's Rosh Chodesh?
Tuesday, Wednesday?
Tuesday, Wednesday is Rosh Chodesh. Sunday's the 5th. So Shabbos is the 4th. Friday's the 3rd. Thursday's the 2nd. So, and I think it's 2 days Rosh Chodesh again, right? I think this is a full year. 2 days Rosh Chodesh Kislev and Tevis. Okay. Cup Freilich and Hanukkah. Well, I won't see you in Shir later, but we'll see each other later.
In Shir?
There's no Shir. That's what I'm saying. I will not see you in Shir. How do I take no? Hello, there it is.
There's review today.
Review today. Right now,